Good morning. Welcome to the DK and the Hawk show. We are short the Hawk, but he will be joining us momentarily. Um, we're joined today by a good friend of ours, Andy Lepage, noted Flames fan. And what we're going to do in this show, Andy brought it up, and I really think it's going to be a good topic. We're going to talk about the off season, and so we're going to go through all 15 teams that did not make the playoffs, and we'll discuss kind of what they're going to do in the future, who they're going to sign, who they're going to take, how they're going to maybe fix their team up to get into the playoffs. But before we start that discussion, I'd like to send out a well wishes to John Tavares and the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was a horrendous hit. Um, I personally think it wasn't on purpose, and we can debate the whole fight between him and Nick Foligno. Um, I I like that Perry took the fight, and hopefully the whole thing is behind them. But and it sounds like John will be okay. I don't know how long he's going to be out for, but hopefully, hopefully he can get back before the end of the series. Andy, what did you think of the hit, and say some words for 91 on Toronto there?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think anybody that, I mean, even with it being Corey Perry, I think a lot of people are quick to jump on the villain bandwagon for that. But honestly, there was absolutely no intent there. I don't believe there was anything at all that Perry could have done. And I actually, honestly, I felt for him afterwards because you could see that he was also really shaken by it, and he really felt terrible about it. And so I don't think there was any intent whatsoever. I think the fight was really unfortunate, but I suppose in a way I do understand it, that it's better to just get it over with and get it done so that it doesn't become a talking point for the rest of the series. I agree. Kudos to Corey Perry for standing in there, and he defended himself, but he also I think he was a little bit heavy-hearted having to do it as well. But like I said, hopefully that puts it behind them. John Tavares is really one of the truly good guys in the game. I feel. I think New York Islanders fans probably still hold a little bit of a grudge against him, but other than that, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to find anybody that would have anything bad to say about Tavares. He's a classy player, and it's definitely a big loss for the Leafs. There's no question there, but this is one of those situations where some things are bigger than the game, and you just really hope for the best of his health. Definitely for a speedy recovery. I mean, for the Leafs, they're obviously hoping for that for the playoffs, but you really just hope for him as a human being that this doesn't have any long-term effects.
Yeah, totally agree with that. They had a report where Nick said to Corey, basically, we know it was an accident, but that's our captain, so we got to do this. Kind of like the hockey code. Um, I think if it was a different player, then maybe the fight doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
You look at a player like Corey Perry. He's he's labeled as one of those
Yeah.
guys that kind of plays on the edge. So
Yeah, the villain, like I said.
that's probably why that
Yeah.
happened. Yeah. So um, yeah, I don't know exactly the extent of the injuries to John, but hopefully he can get back sooner rather
Yeah.
than later, and we can have the best on best in that
For
series.
sure. I honestly, just looking at the nature of the injury, and just, I mean, that was absolutely horrific to watch, like just with him struggling so badly on the ice and that kind of thing. But I honestly, I would be absolutely shocked if he came back this series or even next series. To be honest, I think it is going to be a little bit longer term than that. But he's a resilient guy. He's had really good health for the most part throughout his career. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Leafs do make it as far as the conference finals, or I don't even know what we're going to call that this year. The two semifinals. I don't know. There's not really conferences this year, so but if
I
they
think they
can
call
make
it the
the third round,
Stanley semifinals now.
yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
basically third round.
Yeah, but yeah, if the Leafs make it that far, I could see him potentially making a return by then.
Well, hopefully. Um, but so we'll put that behind us.
Hmm.
This show is basically about the off season. So we're going to talk about the teams in the order of draft lottery, um, from the best odds to the worst odds. So we'll start off with the worst team this year, the team that is in serious trouble, and they have some good players, but they just can't figure it out. And this is the Buffalo Sabres. I have them ranked as a rebuilder. Some of the notes I made on them are Eichel will be traded. You got to get best value, and you're not going to get the value you want for him, but you got to get at least something.
Hmm.
Um, Something that comes to mind is the Oilers trading Taylor Hall, getting Adam Larson. I think that they could have got a lot more if they kind of were patient on that
Yeah.
aspect, but it's kind of the same deal. Hall wanted out, and they wanted to get something in return, and they pulled the trigger.
Hmm.
Now, Adam Larson is a good player, but Taylor Hall was a superstar at the time, so I I feel like that was like a big loss for Edmonton. Also, I say they have lots of good young pieces, which they do, and they need to change the losing culture. Um, so, what do you think about the Sabers and what they can do and what they should do?
Well, I think honestly, despite the recent history of the Sabres, I honestly do feel like a lot of people had much higher expectations for them this year because, as you said, they did seem to have a pretty good foundation built there, and with the hopes that Jack Eichel would have a big bounce back season, there was a lot of potential there. I mean, they went into this season with Eric Stahl as well, which didn't work out. They had Taylor Hall. I think a lot of people were really shocked about that signing, and I said, what? Why would Hall decide to go there? But I honestly think it's because a lot
Yeah.
of people expected better. Um, I honestly was never a fan of the hiring of Ralph Kruger. To be honest, I'm not at all shocked that that went the way that it was. I honestly don't see
Yeah.
how he's still considered an NHL worthy coach. So I'm not surprised at all that that went the way it is. But the Sabres have been a really tough luck team. They've been patient. They've been trying to be patient. This marks their 11th straight year without playoffs, which is now an NHL record. And that makes it really sad that we're still referring to them now as a rebuilding team, because
Right.
that basically indicates that by the time they make the playoffs, it could easily be 14, 15 years that they've gone without the playoffs. Um, this is a team that they lucked out getting Jack Eichel, but I don't know if you remember this back then, but they went quite publicly and complained about the draft lottery and the fact that they missed out on Connor McDavid. And when Jack Eichel was
Yeah.
asked about their stance on that, he was kind of like, well, I think I'm a pretty good player too. So I think, they should be
Yeah.
pretty happy to be with me as well. And so I can't help but wonder if that didn't start off that relationship on a little bit of a sour note. And I almost wonder if Jack Eichel didn't feel like that was a little bit of an underestimation of his abilities as well. But
Hmm.
this is a team that has tried to be patient with their rebuild, and they got Jack Eichel second overall by getting a fortunate draft lottery pick, but then they continued to be patient, and they finally got this coveted first overall pick that they wanted, and they get Rasmus Dahlin. And I mean, a good player, don't get me wrong, or at least he will be a good player, but that's really not the type of caliber of player that we've come to expect from a first overall pick over the last, say
Yeah.
15 years, right? He's really kind of he's definitely one of the weaker links in that list of players. So their patience, they finally got that first overall pick, and unfortunately, it just wasn't the greatest draft year. So now they have Rasmus Dahlin, who, like I said, is a good defenseman. He'll be good on the offensive side of the puck, but he's proven himself to be quite a defensive liability. And so that's something that they really
Yeah.
need to hope that he'll improve on as he gets some more experience. But having said that, they've also made a lot of really questionable moves that have them, despite being in a rebuild right now, they're also dealing with a bit of a salary cap crunch. I mean, they have Jeff Skinner signed for the next 6 years at $9 million a year. And this is a guy who
Yep.
just couldn't get anything going this year. And he was given that kind of money as, under the tooling of a 40 goal scorer. And what I'll say about Jeff Skinner is that, in my opinion, he is not a 40 goal scorer. He is a guy who has scored 40 goals. And you understand the distinction.
Yes. Agreed.
Alexander Ovechkin is a 50 goal scorer. Jeff Skinner is a guy who somehow caught lightning in a bottle and scored 40 goals, but you cannot expect that from him on a regular basis. So they're stuck under that salary. They still have 2 more years of Kyle Opozo at $6 million, which is quite an overpayment.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal, man.
So
yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
I've
I mean,
done Buffalo Sabres rebuilds before, and
yeah,
it's just so hard to get out of
yeah,
salary cap hell.
yeah.
Um,
So
let me
looking down their list, they do
I
have
just
some
pulled up
good
the
young pieces, but I think they're going to be a bit of a mess for a few years to come.
yeah, like I was saying, um, when you brought up Rasmus Dahlin, I looked up the draft. This is like the worst draft I've ever seen for first round
Yeah.
talent. Um, Andrei Svechnikov is a decent player. He went number 2 to Carolina. They got Brady Tkachuk 4, which might be him and Quinn Hughes might be the top 2 players of the draft. Quinn Hughes went 7 to Vancouver. Just going through, there's some okay defensive prospects. There's Adam Boquist and Bouchard and Dobson. I remember that's the year the Flames traded their first to Islanders for Hamonic,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, that would have been a good player for Calgary because we kind of
Mm-hmm.
needed some young D. So, but yeah, uh, especially if Buffalo does make a trade with Eichel and they don't get back, like this, this could go 15, 20 years, no playoffs
Yeah.
if they don't hit the Eichel trade out of the park.
Yeah.
Now, um, I actually have a later on. I'll let you know where I think Eichel will be going because it's one of the teams on here.
Mm-hmm.
But so notable RFAs are Dahlin and Sam Reinhart,
Yeah.
good players like we discussed, but both
And I
high
don't see
picks
either of
that
those guys
haven't
going
really
anywhere.
turned into. No, they're no RFAs don't go anywhere unless there's a big trade or like the odd offer sheet.
Yeah.
I don't I don't see I don't see Buffalo losing either of those guys. So we'll move on to the next team on the list, the Anaheim Ducks. I have them as a rebuilder as well.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like Ryan Getzlaff, he's going to be. I think he'll be gone. Like
Mm-hmm.
he had his exit interview. I don't know if you heard it, but he seemed like he still wanted to play. He wanted to stay. But does Anaheim want to continue to sign him and have him be the face, or do you want to kind of transition to the younger players like Trevor Zegras
Sam
and
Steele.
Sam Steele, those guys?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of the Ducks?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a team that's very realistic about where they stand right now. I think Bob Murray is a really good man. So I think that he's the right guy to have in that position, and I think he's going to do a good job of being patient and sticking with it. But I do think that it is time for them to finally move on from Ryan Getzlaff. And I think Ryan Getzlaff is a good player. Like, I don't think he's done. I think he'll end up somewhere, but it'll be a fairly cheap contract. Like, I think if somebody can get him for around $1.5 million or something like that,
Agreed.
he's a good guy that could help you out, and could still put up some good minutes. Anaheim is a team that has some really good pieces. They still have Adam Henrique and Jacob Silverberg. We mentioned that they've got Sam Steele coming up, and they do have some good young prospects, but they're a team that just time kind of caught up to, and it's just the natural cycle of the way things go in the league, and now it's time to start rebuilding. They have some a really good young goalie in John Gibson, so there's no real need to to push for any changes there. I think they maybe need to trade a few pieces away, get some really good draft picks. And I think they're going to be just fine. I think it's going to be a couple more seasons of, kind of retooling and building back up. But I
Yeah.
think they're actually in a really good position, and they could be, right back to being a thorn in the side of the Western Conference within a couple years.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay with
One thing
the
I will
Ducks
say
kind of
is
not
I'm a
being
little
there.
bit puzzled still about the use. Yeah. I'm a little bit puzzled about the use of Dallas Eakins, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel, but I'm not a big fan of his as a head coach. But the one thing that they do say about him is that he is really good with the young players. So I suppose while they're being patient with this rebuild, he is probably good for that. But I think once they start showing some signs of being ready to make that push for the playoffs, I do think that they would need to probably make a change at head coach to get them over that hump.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you on the Eakins. I've I've heard that he's well liked for the younger players. When he was the minor league coach, I think
Mm-hmm.
it was with Dallas, and then I think he was too good when he was with Edmonton. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree with how basically like you said off camera. It's more fun when we disagree, but in this situation, I kind of agree. Um,
Yeah,
so my partner in crime is ready to join us here, so we'll just bring in,
excellent.
and then we'll get to the next team on the list. If he ever connects, he lives up north, so he doesn't have good internet, and he's wearing that disgusting shirt. Jesus. Welcome. The Hawk
One of the
is
strongest
here.
requirements of doing an internet read or an internet talk show is having good internet. That's
Yeah,
Well,
we try.
we're working on that. Starlink is coming
Yep.
by the end of the year,
All right.
so should be good.
So you've only missed the first two teams that we've discussed. Um, would you like to add any insight on Buffalo and/or Anaheim before we move on to New Jersey?
Let's hear. Buffalo needs a whole new
Yeah,
rebuild or something. I mean, you
yeah,
can't go
that's
through
kind
a
of what
team
we
that,
were saying.
I mean, you can't have a team like that and have nothing. Eichel's gone. You can get a whole bunch of picks, prospects. They gotta trade him. He's got some dissension out there, right? So he's got
Yep.
to go. I think you can rebuild through trading him. They should have the first overall pick, I believe, if everything goes right. So
Yeah,
that's the way I
depends.
would do it, right? I mean, they
Things
still have
happen, right?
players. As for the Ducks, I mean, same thing, right? They're gonna have to rebuild through the draft, right? See what Getzlaf does, things like that. Those guys who are getting older in life, and I
Yeah,
guess biggest thing is the draft for them, right? I mean, trade some more
yeah.
players if they can, get some prospects, and it's tough when you're in the bottom, but it's always way up to the top, right? It's got to be patient.
So the way we're doing this is we're doing the teams in the order of their percentage of picking number one. So Buffalo, if there was no lottery, we'd go Buffalo, Anaheim. Um,
Okay.
I think the number one player in this draft is Owen Power. He's a defenseman out of Michigan, and then you got Matthew Beignets, who's the top forward. Depends on what draft class you look at. A lot of guys have Beignets first, so it's kind of interesting. I think if it was Buffalo, they'd probably go Beignets, and if it was
Yeah.
Anaheim, they'd probably go the defenseman. So we'll see how it plays
Yeah.
out.
They already have a
There's
good
some
defenseman,
really
right?
good players coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Buffalo's got a great defenseman in
So
Dolly, so
yeah. So we'll move on to New Jersey. Um, I have them classified as a rebuilder as well, as you'll see as the lower teams here. That's kind of what they are. Um, they have multiple picks in this draft, if I'm correct on that. I believe they've made a few deadline deals, sending a bunch of their players to the Islanders. I believe they have picks from them, and they need to change. They need to change their losing culture. They got to get back to when New Jersey was that Stanley Cup contender with Niedermeyer and those guys. Notable free agents is Ryan Murray, Nikita Gusev, Scott Wedgwood, goaltender, and they got some RFAs as well. What do you guys think of New Jersey and what they should be doing this offseason?
Well, I think New Jersey, I mentioned this with Buffalo, how they were trying to be patient with their rebuilding and then waited for these coveted, first overall picks. And New Jersey is another team, just like Buffalo, that was kind of a victim of timing. They actually ended up with 2 first overall picks within 3 years. And to be honest, neither of them are really setting the world on fire. So they had both Nico Hischier and
Jack Hughes.
Jack Hughes. Sorry, I was drawing a blank there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Jack Hughes especially, I think has a lot of potential. But like I said, these are just 2 players that have not really lived up to the caliber of player that we've come to expect from the first overall picks that we've had in the last 15 years or so, where we've had real game changers. Nico Hischier is the captain of the Devils, which I don't know. I suppose there's a reason for that. And things like that, I think a lot of things happen behind the scenes that are maybe a little bit more intangible. So yeah. I assume that the team was happy with that, and they've obviously got him signed under really big money. But I think they're really hanging their hopes that he's gonna really start putting up some bigger numbers than he has. And his numbers haven't been terrible by any means, but like I said, just not quite the caliber of player that we've come to expect from first overall draft picks. But having said that, I think that they do have a lot of good young pieces. I do wonder if, as a rebuilding team, if they wouldn't possibly look at trading PK Subban. Maybe see if they can get a good another first round draft pick for him or something like that. But having said that, I mean, that's a $9 million salary, which is just not very easy to move in the current salary cap situation. So, but I mean, they're also a team that has some cap space, so they could afford to retain some salary on that as well. And I think, PK Subban is a guy that is, getting on in his years a little bit, but he's still very serviceable, and he's a guy that is widely regarded as, he's a fan favorite pretty much everywhere he goes. I think most teams that he's not on tend to dislike him, but as soon as he goes to a team, he just manages to endear himself to the fans and to the team and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm just not sure that he's really going to do much for them in this upcoming season. So I do wonder if they don't look at possibly trading him. But other than that, I mean, this is a team that let's keep in mind they're not very long removed from a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals. So this is a team that has been very successful over the last, look as far back as say 25 years. They've been one of the more successful teams in the NHL, and I have no question that they should be able to make a pretty quick recovery and become a potential playoff challenger in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agree with the PT Subban because they can retain. I think it's is it 2 years left at 9?
Just one.
They can retain. Is it only one?
Yeah.
Like, I honestly see a team like Edmonton or some team that's just would like that power play quarterback guy that can play on the second line on defense and play on the power play. And maybe if New Jersey was willing to pay half of his salary, then maybe get like a second or maybe a late first round pick for him. I think PK Subban would be be really good on Edmonton. I actually they were talking about the Taylor Hall for PK Subban trade back in the day before they got Larson, and I thought that would have been a better deal for Edmonton at the time. Hawk, what do you think of the Devils?
Well, they're in a tough situation with the division they're in. I mean, the Rangers are up and coming. You got the Islanders, who have been up and coming for a few years, still have to deal with the Penguins, still have to deal with the Flyers, right? So they're in a situation like Andy was saying, right? I mean, they got Hughes first overall, and he hasn't really panned out. And isn't it funny how, you know, when it lines up that you actually get a first overall pick and there's the hype isn't as there as much as, say, the year Austin Matthews went, the year McDavid went, and the year Crosby went, right? In that big lottery that we had back in the day. So, I mean, one player makes a huge difference. And will Hughes get it going? Possibly. I mean, he's a first overall pick, right? I mean, I guess time will tell, right? He just was fortunate enough in where he ended up. But I do agree they are a rebuilding team. They do have to look at moving Subban if they can. I mean, if they keep him, save him for half the year, get something out of the trade deadline, they might even get a first out there, depending on what the team's need is that's going to acquire him, right? And he would look good in Edmonton, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, right now you can tell right now that, you know, a guy who can move the puck, who can cause some crap. I mean, those guys are always valuable come playoff time. And he'll defend the guys who get hit, right? He'll go after a guy who runs over McDavid, stuff like that. So, but yeah, they're going to be rebuilding, and next year we'll be talking about them. Yes, he is. And we love him.
Probably. Yeah. So. I don't think New Jersey's close to becoming a playoff team, to be honest. Like you said, their division, there's a lot of powerhouse teams ahead of them. So yeah, they definitely. And one thing when you're a rebuilding team, if you're pitching 1, 2, 3, or 4 every year, and you're not hitting those picks out of the park, it's going to be hard to get back into it. Like you look at Edmonton, they had all those bad first overalls, took them forever to get back. You get McDavid and they get Draisaitl, and now they're kind of back to becoming a perennial playoff team. And then you just got to build around those two guys. So that's kind of what I think on New Jersey. The next team on my list is the Blue Jackets, and the notes I have here are, and I said this from the beginning, I think that Patrick Laine trade was really bad for Columbus. I don't think they're going to be able to keep him. And one thing about Columbus is players don't re-sign in Columbus for some reason. I don't know if it's the location or people don't want to live in that market, or that's just not an attractive place to play hockey or what. But I've noticed that they bring players in usually in the last couple of years of their deal. They can't re-sign them, and it's too bad because Columbus was a really exciting team when they had Panarin and Bobrovsky and those guys in that playoff series where they swept the Lightning. Thought they were coming on, and they just can't keep their guys. So I'm not sure. What do you guys think is the reason behind that? And do you see Patrick Laine signing an extension?
So pardon me, I believe I agree with you that the Patrick Laine trade did not work out, at least in terms of Patrick Laine himself. But looking back at that trade, the thing that actually really sticks out to me is the fact that they got Laine and Jack Roslovic for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And that, to be honest, to me was a big loss for Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg overpaid in that trade, and I think Jack Roslovic is actually really underestimated in terms of his skills. So I think, you know, that's an important piece for them. But the way that I see Columbus, honestly, is they're going to be a retooling team. I think that they do have a lot of really good young pieces right now. And to be honest, I think that they were a victim of a shelf life for John Tortorella. John Tortorella, I think, is a good coach in a very short time. You know, he's a guy that you can bring in. when your team needs a kick in the butt to get over a hump, but he has a very short shelf life before his, typical routine becomes old, and the team basically, starts to not listen. And so I think Columbus did the right thing in moving on from him in this offseason. They're doing obviously a lot of shakeups in their front office. They just brought back John Davidson as their president, who I think is a really good man. Jarmo Kekalainen, I think, is a very good GM, and I think he's done a very good job. You hit the nail on the head. Columbus is not one of those really sexy hockey markets, and it's very tough for them to get free agents there because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's not exactly a hockey mad market. It's a market that's more about college sports, and they don't really have a lot of professional sports of any kind in that area. So it is tough for them to get free agents there. But I mean, you look at it, they still got Cam Atkinson, they've got Max Domi, who's there for another year, and I could see signing an extension. I could see Patrick Laine re-signing there. To be honest, I think a lot of his struggles probably had to do with Tortorella himself. I think a lot of people kind of snickered when we heard about that trade because we were like, Patrick Laine playing for John Tortorella? Are you kidding me? One of the most defensively liable players in the league. Yeah. So I think that was kind of a disaster right from the get-go. So I could see Patrick Laine re-signing there because if he was a UFA, it might be a different story, but he's an RFA, and he'll get a decent qualifying offer, and I think the Blue Jackets are very keen to give him another chance to see what happens. But there's no question this offseason for the Columbus Blue Jackets is the most critical thing is getting the right head coach in there. They're moving on from John Tortorella. I could see them definitely kicking some tires around Gerard Gallant. But I could also see them bringing in somebody that we've never even really thought of. They might try and find a diamond in the rough in the minor leagues, or possibly even, I mean, Columbus went kind of off the grid in bringing in Jarmo Kekalainen. He was the first European GM in the NHL, if I can remember correctly. And who knows, maybe Jarmo Kekalainen goes back to that and brings in somebody from the international ranks to come back and be their coach.
Yeah, agree. The one thing with Laine is his qualifying offer is going to be pretty high. So I'm sure that Columbus will qualify him, but you could almost see a situation where they might decline it. I think it's something like 7.5 million to closer to 8. So then it's pretty high for a qualifying offer. So Hawk, what do you think of this Columbus team?
Well, I will say one thing. They do have the greatest goal scoring celebration with a cannon firing every time they score. I love that part of it, but
yeah,
hey, it's awesome. And then with AC/DC player in the background. But I mean, if they could ever sure. Andy said, and like you said, if they could ever break through the college atmosphere in Columbus, I mean, they can get fans in the stands there. I mean, we've seen what they've done for the college sports. I mean, it could be huge. The play on the ice, Tortorella, obviously being a Canucks fan, we went through that for the 1 year that he was here. We ended up getting actually, I think, a second or third round for Tortorella signing with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And
that works then.
I mean, depending on, I think, who the coach is, comes in to say with Laine, they could turn around. He wanted out of Winnipeg, and it's I'll put it this way, like you guys said, they are a retooling team. I mean, a few pieces here and there, and they could be back fighting for it. There's no question, right? They do have the pieces to do that.
Yeah. And
I guess the offseason, this is one offseason for them where if they can win the lottery or move up, you never know, right? It would be a huge advantage for them right up the hop, and we could see them back in the playoffs. And as for somebody, maybe they do qualify, Lonnie, I can't see anybody spending that kind of money on Lonnie, I mean, he's kind of fallen on the wayside, right? Defensive skills aren't there. His goal scoring production has gone down drastically. And you're going to spend that kind of money, especially in a salary cap world where it's going to be a flat for what, 3-4 years possibly. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be an interesting story to watch for sure. But
that's kind
I
of
mean,
my
few
thinking
pieces here
with,
and they could be right back in it.
that's kind of my thinking with the qualifying offer being so high. They like if they sign him to an extension, I think it would have to be below that number. I don't see him getting like a 8 times 7 or anything like that. Maybe another 1-year deal.
Yeah, not even
to get him to
not
UFA.
even close. I can't see it.
If I was Lane, I would sign like whatever years until I'm UFA. I'd take lower and try to get to that 40 goal point. And like we talked about with Buffalo, like Jeff Skinner got paid an insane amount of money because he went to Buffalo 1 year and he got 43 goals or something. They give him 9 million times 7, and now look at them. So that's what I would do if I was Line. I would sign short term and try to prove what I am. But we'll move on now to the next team on the list, the Detroit Red Wings. I have them as a rebuilder, which they've been a rebuilder for a long time now. My notes on them: they need to get back to the hockey town glory. They need to build around Dylan Larkin. I think he's one of the top young centers in the NHL, and I do believe Stevie Y has a plan. He's kind of gone off the board a little bit with some of these picks. Moritz Seidler was kind of off the board, but he's looking like he's turning into a pretty decent player. Notable UFAs: Mark Stahl, Darren Helm, Jonathan Bernier. Nobody that's gonna turn your team around. Some young RFAs as well. We got Tyler Bertuzzi, Jacob Verana, which they just got in the trade with Washington, which I feel like they made out really well with that deal. I think it was 2 first-round picks for Anthony Mantha. Kind of threw us for a loop there on trade deadline day. Didn't see that going down. Yeah, I feel like Detroit has some good young players. They got to get under some of these high paid third, fourth line guys. But what do you guys think of the Red Wings?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's always been kind of the calling card of the Red Wings is patience. And you remember, I mean, Steve Yzerman is in there as the GM now, but he first learned the business of general management under Ken Holland in Detroit. And that was one thing that Ken Holland was always famous for, is having an extreme amount of patience with their young guys. And Detroit was such a good team for so long. They made the playoffs for, I can't remember what it was, 25 years in a row or something like that. We all knew that this time was coming where Detroit was going to seriously fall off and need to rebuild, and they're doing it right now. And I agree with you that Stevie Y is the right guy to be in there and to have a plan. It is probably a little bit of a longer term plan. So I mean, I could see Detroit still continuing to retool for the next possibly 4 years or so. But I agree with you. I think they did amazing. And I'm a big fan of Anthony Mantha, to be honest, but they did really good in pulling off what they did for the return there. And I think that's really going to help them right the ship here. And, they could get a couple of really good picks out of that. So, I definitely think that they're headed in the right direction for sure. They had to hit rock bottom before they started to show some signs of life. But I think they're headed in the right direction now, and if they can keep going and keep being patient, they could be an exciting team to watch a few years down the road.
What do you think, Hawk?
Well, we'll put it this way. I mean, getting Stevie Y in was the biggest move they could have made. Next year, I think that's another thing too. Coming into next year is, I know there's been talk of divisions maybe having a Canadian division again next year because the ratings were so high, where obviously you'd be playing the American teams as well, right?
Yep.
Even if they do go back to the original divisions, they're going to be a team. I mean, you're going to be playing Buffalo, you're going to be playing, but you're going to be playing, and then Ottawa, right? Those are your bottom 3 teams or 2 teams. They're still in a rebuild mode, right? They're still a couple years away from maybe even getting close to making the playoffs, maybe making one of those runs where they win a bunch of games at the end, just squeak in. But I mean, you got a good foundation with Stevie Y in there. He's done it for Tampa Bay. He's going to come to Detroit. I think he's going to make some magic. You know, they got to sign their young guys. I mean, Bertuzzi's out there, right? You guys sign him as an RFA, and then just be patient. That's the biggest thing, right? It's still a couple years away from them making the playoffs. So keep those octopies on ice, and then let them fly in about 3 years.
Yeah, that's the word I heard from both of you guys, patience, and that's kind of what they do in Detroit. They like back in the day, I remember when I was a kid with like Better Off coming in, and you got Datsuk and Zetterberg. They seem to find these guys in later rounds, and it's been working for them. So hopefully they can get it together and figure that out. The next team on the list, and I feel like this team is in way more trouble than a lot of people say, is the San Jose Sharks. And the first thing I wrote is a bullet point: salary cap hell. And if you look at these players that they have that are going to be in their 40s making 8, 9, 10, $11 million on the cap, is it's just kind of hilarious. It's like they wanted to win now. They said, you guys want long-term deals, we'll give them to you, we'll figure it out when we get there. So procrastinating to the end is T. Eric Carlson, 11.5 million. Logan Couture, 8. Brent Burns, 8. Vlasic, 7. Vander Kane, like he's owing money to casinos. He's trying to fight Logan Paul so he can pay his gambling debt. Like unbelievable. I gotta hope that fight happens because that'd be entertaining. But so basically, I have salary cap hell. Make trades. If they can trade any of these guys for just picks, just move on. Try to while they still have trade value. Brent Burns could probably still bring some value to a team. We probably eat salary, things like that, and cut the cord with Patrick Marleau is the one thing I have here. It was nice. He came back. He won. He didn't win, but he broke the Gordie Howe record. He played 56 games this year and he scored 4 goals. Like, let's be honest, he's not where he used to be. He says he wants to come back. These guys, like, if you're going to chase a Stanley Cup, that's one thing. But if he comes back and signs with the Sharks just so he can extend that record, there's no point to that. Like, if he's going to sign with a team like Toronto or Pittsburgh or somebody that has a shot at the cup, then I'm all for that. It'd be nice for some of these guys, long-term guys, to go for a Stanley Cup and potentially win one. So what do you guys think of the Sharks here? I feel like they're many years away, especially with the team they've built. And don't forget about Martin Jones. Martin Jones is making a ton of money too, and he's shelved himself too.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there, DK. It's like the salary cap that they found themselves in is just an absolute nightmare. And one thing that I wonder about them is if it's not time to move on from Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson showed some signs of, having a really solid plan and making some solid decisions at the time that he brought in some of these players like Erik Karlsson and like Evander Kane. But the signings that he gave them after he brought them in those trades are just shocking. And honestly, a lot of times players will sign these big deals, and it's easy to look back on things several years into the deal and say, well, you know what, this one didn't quite work out as it was expected. These are ones where the moment that these deals were signed, people just said, what are you doing? Like the $11.5 million for Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson is a great defenseman. I don't think anybody's gonna deny that. He's offensively one of the best defensemen out there. But I don't think anybody in the world other than Doug Wilson would have given him $11 million, especially on an 8-year deal. And it just gets worse from there. Like you said, $8 million for Brent Burns, $7 million for Marc-Edouard Vlasic, $8 million even for Logan Couture, who I love. I think he's an amazing player. But even that seems a little bit high. The Evander Kane, honestly, I think the best thing that could happen for the San Jose Sharks is if they find a way to void the Evander Kane contract. Because other than that, a lot of these players that we're talking about that they might be able to trade, they're going to have to retain a lot of salary on that. And for a team that's already at the cap, having to retain that salary and try and find a player to replace that, it's a tall order. And, like I said, I really do wonder if they don't start kicking some tires and maybe look at moving on from Doug Wilson, who's been at the helm for, I don't even remember what it is. I think it's close to 20 years now or something like that. So
He's been there as far as I know.
I do wonder if they need a new, So I do wonder if they might need a new mastermind at the helm.
Well, you bring that up. Unless you're an assistant GM and you're looking for a job, like who wants to take the responsibility of fixing that mess? Like I'm sure any assistant GM who's looking for that full-time gig would accept a job offer. I'm not saying they wouldn't, but that's a tough mess to get yourself out of. Sorry for cutting you off there, Hawk. I just had to add that in.
Oh, all good. Yeah, the mighty have fallen. Jumbo Joe woke up one day last year and said, "Yeah, Toronto looks like a good place to play. I'm out of here," and away he went.
Yeah.
And the last decade, right? San Jose was in the running for everything, right? Every year they were making noise, and as you said, right, you're in that salary cap with it not moving, being a flat cap, they're in trouble. And you're not going to get what you think you're going to get for Karlsson, with Vlasic, with Evander Kane. Like you said, if they can get out of the contract, that would be great. They'd have to find a way to do that. I mean, Brent Burns might be the only guy that you might get something out of. The guy can still play hockey, can play both forward and defense, and he's a spark, but Karlsson's skills have seemed to diminish. And they're in a tough hole, right? So, we might be watching them as a bottom feeder for the next 3, 4, 5 years for sure, till they can get a bunch of salary off. Or, like you said, sign 8-year contracts. It's tough to sign those contracts. If you're going to do it when they're young. Got to do it when they're 23, 24, 25. And I don't think you can bury these contracts in the minors.
They're going to have 3 40-year-olds making over $7 million if they can't get out of it. If they don't retire, if they just stay there. Brent Burns is 35. I kind of disagree with you with him having trade value. I don't think he has trade value at all, just with his age. Like, you might be able to bring him in and maybe 1 year be serviceable, but not at that cap. That's a really high cap for what he is. I don't think he's the same player that he was even when they went to the finals against the Penguins. San Jose's in serious trouble. I don't know what they're going to do. If they can get out of one of those contracts, I'd be shocked. Mm-hmm. There's 5 bad ones. Logan Couture is the best. He's still a good player. He makes a lot of money, but he still didn't score goals for you. Evander Kane is in serious, off-ice trouble. And then
but
Vlasic,
gambling, I don't think
Burns.
Gambling, you can't
Karlsson,
get rid of the contract, right?
Not good.
With gambling, that issue, you can't avoid the contract. That's more of, it has to be something he's done that's criminally charged, right? So, I can't see him getting out of that contract. They can try something unless he has something in his contract stating, right?
No, I definitely don't think that they have an out from those personal issues, but
No.
There might be some other things that are underlying there. Who knows? Maybe that whole thing with that fight that he's trying to get into, maybe somehow they find a loophole and use that as a way to get out of his contract because he, made himself uninsurable. I don't know, something like that. But
that's why I can't see him fighting.
No.
I can't see him find the guy because you're giving up your career now, right? Because they'll just say, "Oh, that's another activity other than hockey, right?" So
the Sharks are
can't
probably
say, "Oh, I
pushing
fight in
for
the
it."
off season.
Fight that guy.
We'll host it here tonight.
Knocked out. Yeah. Probably set it up.
Fighting's no longer a skill in hockey, so you can't fight in the off season just to prepare for the regular season.
Yeah. All right. So we don't want to turn this into a San Jose Sharks bashing episode, but anyway, sorry, Sharks fans, if there is any anymore.
They might be picking first overall next year, right?
Maybe.
So
as long as they don't trade that pick away.
Oh yeah, because Ottawa was
traded to Ottawa for nothing.
And another thing too now with the new draft rules is you can only draft first overall. I think was it once in the first 5 years or twice in 5 years or it's so.
I think you can only win the lottery first once every 3 years or something like that.
Yeah. So as a fan of the Pacific or the West, the division we're in, man, it's like good on them. They're going to be being on in a lot of years, and it's going to be good, right? It's feast on the Sharks. So.
All right. So let's move on to the next team on my list. I'm wearing their jersey today, one of my vintage classics, Los Angeles Kings. So I find them as a retooler. They're getting better. They had a decent season, to be honest, from what I saw. My first bullet point is don't waste Doughty and Kopitar. I feel like they're still good players. They do make a lot of money, just like the Sharks players that we were discussing. And they have some great prospects that they've gotten through the draft in the last couple of years. Alex Turcotte, Quentin Byfield, guys like that. And they got some. I like their goalie Peterson. So if they could maybe make a deal and trade Jonathan Quick this offseason, I think that would help them in their retool. What do you guys think of the Kings? And do you think they can get back to the playoffs anytime soon?
And I think the important thing to know with the Kings is that they've fallen on some hard times, but let's not forget they're only 9 and 7 years removed from their Stanley Cup championships. Now, having said that, I do think that there's still a few pieces remaining from those championships that it's maybe time to move on from. Like, they only have 1 year left of Dustin Brown, and honestly, I can't see them bringing him back after that year. Anze Kopitar is still a great player. He's a guy that's a perennial candidate for the Selke. He's really a great two-way player. The thing that I thought about when I was looking at this and preparing for the show is I said, you look at the Kings and they look like they have a lot of potential to start heading in the right direction here. And the one thing that I thought about is I was like, man, the Kings could really benefit from having a player like Tyler Toffoli or having a player like Jake Muzzin. And then I was like, wait a minute, they had those two players. And, a few years back, there was no question that they got themselves into a little bit of salary trouble, and there was no question that they had to start moving some pieces. But I think they really got that part wrong, and they unfortunately moved. And those are two guys that they could really help or really use right now. But, as you said, they do have some good up-and-coming prospects. I do think I agree with you 100%. And, in fact, I have a very good trade scenario that we could possibly talk about when we get to that team for Jonathan Quick that you just mentioned. But this is a team that is definitely headed in the right direction. I think that they could be back to challenging for a playoff spot in a little bit. I think Todd McClellan is a very good guy to have at the helm there. To be honest, I don't think he was the problem in Edmonton when he was there. I do think he's a very good coach. Rob Blake, he's done okay as the general manager. I'm really waiting for him to really prove that he's got some big master plan. But we'll see what happens. But they should benefit from a good draft pick again this year, and they do have some opportunities to make some trades and potentially get some other good picks in there as well.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I feel like the Kings are kind of doing what the Oilers used to do. They're just employing former players, and I don't always agree with that. Edmonton and Kevin Lowe and different guys like that in those positions. Craig McTavish, like he was a coach and got fired, and then he just like hired as a GM a few years later. It's kind of laughable.
Yeah.
So Hawk, I see that you went on a little adventure there. So I
Yeah,
see
you
you're
had
back
to.
in your seat. So
Well, I'm trying to find my
but no,
notes, so I'm kind of flying blind on this. So
I was
like
worried
I
that
said,
you're taking us on a pee or something, man.
Oh no,
Jeez.
I had to get my. Sorry, I thought we were doing the
turn the
afternoon
video
show.
off. Yeah.
I thought we were doing an
I was
afternoon
trying to
show,
turn the
so I
video
just was
off.
like,
I didn't know what was going on. All right, so go
Oh,
ahead.
no.
Give us your insights on the Kings.
yeah, on the Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be a funny team, I think, over the next few years. It's kind of they got the pieces that still kind of compete. They still have the guys who won that cup, right? Who play hard. They still have Drew Doughty, one of the top defensemen, and we do miss the old Kachuk Doughty battles. So
Yeah.
And we will be getting those next year once again, so that'll be good. But like you say, right, there's some pieces. They're in this position where they can trade some pieces now, maybe take a little bit of a hit for a year or two to get those pieces out, like get Kopitar out, get Quick out, get maybe Brown out, right? Get something to kind of build and then start off again. If you hang on too long to these guys, you can't get nothing for them, right? So you might be able to get something, especially come trade deadline next year. I mean, some teams will pay for somebody, especially a guy who's won the cup. Who could be a third line center, right? Or depth goaltender, right? You need depth for goaltending in the playoffs. And we've already seen that with Washington, right? Losing their starter right off the hop. So, like I said, they're going to be in a funny situation, which depends on which way they want to go. And it's up to them, right? They could either be real good or real bad in a few years.
I feel like those big trades, when you have term left on your contract, are usually done in the summer. So be interested to see if they wanted to change the whole thing, because Doughty came out this week and he said that he wants the team to make more moves to be competitive. He doesn't want to be part of a rebuild anymore. He's tired of it. So will that force them to maybe deal Doughty if they have another plan, or will they change their philosophy and maybe go into free agency, because they do have a fair bit of cap space this year? But let's move on to the next team. Vancouver Canucks. I feel like they're a retooler. They had a good playoff in the bubble, and then this year fell into some tough times, especially with the COVID outbreak and everything. The notes I have for them is they have a good core. They need to ditch salary this summer, and I feel that an offer sheet could be coming. Based on the numbers I have here, they have 5.7 million in cap space, and you have Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes are RFAs, and Olli Juolevi. Not that he's really proven himself, and I think even Hawk will agree that maybe that was not the pick that they should have made at number 4. Maybe I think it was 5.
It was
maybe
5.
Maybe Kachuk's the right pick there for you guys. But we can debate that at another time. notable UFAs: Alex Edler, Brandon Sutter, Travis Hamonic, and I feel like the RFAs are going to be really exciting to watch this year. For Vancouver, I I think Elias Pettersson is going to be the player that does get paid, and Quinn Hughes could be stolen here for a hefty price if someone actually decided to go that route, because I don't think Vancouver could match an offer sheet. Um, Start with you, Andy, and what do you think of what I said, and your own personal notes on the team that we all dislike?
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going to start off with. That is, of course, they're the team that we love to hate. But as much as that's been the case for a long time, the objective hockey fan in me says that this is a team with a whole lot of potential coming up here. They did the right thing by pushing the rebuild button a couple years ago. For a while there, ever since the Stanley Cup final run back in 2011, they had been kind of holding on to that and hoping to recapture that glory. And then they finally decided, you know what, this isn't working. We need to be a little bit more realistic, and it's time to do a rebuild here. So when they were able to move on from the Sedins, that certainly cleared up a lot of salary cap for them, and set them in a new direction. Brock Besser, Bo Horvat, those are two really, really great players that, as much as, I love to kind of, joke about the Canucks and that kind of thing. Those are two players that I have a lot of respect for. Elias Pettersson is as dynamic a player not dynamic, but as offensively gifted a player as possible. He's not a guy that's going to set the world on fire on the defensive side of the game, but you need some of that offensive flair as well, and he brings that in spades. So I think this is a team that is really headed in the right direction. I will be honest, I was a little bit surprised actually that they decided to bring back Jim Benning. There was a lot of talk about him potentially being cut loose this summer, and then they decided to re-sign him. I'm not a big fan, to be honest. I think that he's a guy that just kind of floats a little bit. I haven't really seen him do anything that really shocks anything and makes you say, wow, like I don't think anybody saw that coming. I think he tends to play things a little bit too safe. And I think that this is a team that if you take some risks, you could really fast forward their rebuilding. So I was a little bit surprised about that. I actually thought that they were going to move on from Jim Benning, but as you said, they do have some really good pieces up and coming. They have a very exciting young core. There's no question that Thatcher Demko really started to show some real potential this year as their new number one. And it's not a bad thing for them to have Braden Holtby there to still provide a little bit more stability and mentorship there. He's a guy that's won the Vezina Trophy, so while he's not quite that same player anymore, I think he's a good mentor for Thatcher Demko. And I do think that they could definitely use a bit of a retooling on defense. And I think I would actually be a little bit surprised if they brought back Alexander Edler. I think that they're kind of ready to move on from there. I mean, I think maybe Hawk might have a little bit of a different take on that. But Tyler Myers, that signing, I think that was a little much. That was a little much. And I'm actually a fan of Tyler Myers, and I do think he's a very good defenseman. But having $6 million a year tied up in him for another 3 years is a little bit. Nate Schmidt was actually a pretty good pickup in the offseason. Maybe a little high on that one, but I think that was certainly a good pickup. And they didn't really do anything wrong in picking up Travis Hamonic for a year, but I'd be a little bit surprised if they had him back as well.
All right, Hawk, what do you think of your team?
All right. Well, yeah, looking through here, right, you got your Sutter's gone. That's going to save you $4.3 million. You got Ether gone. He was making $6 million. I can't see them bringing them back if you're going to be resigning both Hughes and and Pedersen. Virtanen, that's a contract that the Canucks will probably get out of, right? So I think he's done. They'll be able to probably cut that money. Furlan, I believe, will probably end up retiring due to concussions, which is sad. So they will do what they need to do to, I think, to free up the money for those two. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Some guys, I think Pedersen's going to get the most. He's going to get signed right away. But I mean, hey, if someone wants to give Quinn Hughes $8-9 million a year for 4, 5, 6 years, what's that? 4 first-round draft picks, you know?
Yep.
But I can't see anyone giving Hughes that. I mean, he kind of, you know, he's a smaller defenseman, still might need to prove himself a bit, right? He only played a few games 1 year to get to burn to be in the league, so he's only got really 2 full years under his belt. And we had the pandemic hit last year and then the half season this year. Going forward, they are a team though. Like you say, I think Benny's been burnt with the Louis Eriksson deal, which will come off here in 2 years. Yep. Which, you know, hasn't even played. I don't think he played a game this year. So he could be a guy. I think he's done. I think this is his last year coming up.
Yeah.
And then you also have Roberto Longo, right? Contract they still have to pay this year. So, you know, I mean, the future
that one's hilarious.
The future looks good in 2 years. Yeah, he's still playing for the Canucks, by the way.
Years, still paying for him.
You know, if I was Vancouver, I'd be like, you know what, Luongo, we still own you. You better come over here for a year for goaltending coach. You know, that's what I would be saying. Make that $3.5 million worth.
Just have him sell beer in the stands or something.
Yeah,
be a mascot.
But
he should put that stupid shark thing costume on.
Oh yeah,
whatever
he
that
could sit beside the green man. You know,
we can be nice to each other all we want, but we got to trash each other a little bit here.
Oh yeah, don't worry, the Flames are coming up. But
I know.
I think, like I said, I think Green.
Hey, I lay into him here.
Yeah, Green's been bitten a few times, and that's why I think he does kind of play it safe. I mean, I'm surprised he came back too after losing to Foley for nothing. You know, they could have probably re-signed him, made some moves, but I mean, they do have a lot of young kids coming up. They got that big Russian, Pavlinsky or whatever coming up, who should hopefully, I think he will be signed here the off season. Big Russian, played well in the KHL for the 4th line minutes he got. Right, they still have some young guys coming up, and I guess this is another draft for the Canucks that if they can hit on it, it's going to set their future ahead. They did take a hit. They lost the draft the year that they got Pedersen. So really the Canucks won the draft that year because the guys ahead of them haven't done much. And, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They're a team that's, I mean, they play hard, right? They work hard. They came back from COVID, swept the Leafs at home. But you can tell at the end that they're just tired. But I mean, they kept putting the pressure on. They didn't quit, and you gotta like that, right? And I mean, you're playing for Travis Green. He'll be back hopefully next year because that whole coaching staff hasn't been signed. So, right, that's all up in there too.
Actually, last night Travis Green re-signed, so he's coming back.
Oh, did he? I've been busy.
Yep.
So, you know.
Yeah.
Having breakfast with the wife.
Announced that in the Edmonton game.
So if they can get him signed,
he's going to be back.
And then they need to sign the goaltending. Who is out? Sorry, I'm just trying to blank here, but yeah, Benny. I think this is Benny's last year either way. Unless they can make some noise, make the playoffs, and make a run in the playoffs. You know, I think it's on him for this season. And then the new GM coming in is going to have a whole whack of money to play with. So.
Yeah. Let's see.
But
see what happens.
I think they are a team that may battle for the bottom end of the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make it, just with the kind of salary cap issues and that they're under right now, and having to sign those 2 players. But we'll see what happens. You know, they could always trade a couple players, like Travis Mott. They could trade a couple other guys, so the teams would take.
Yeah, be interesting offseason for Vancouver. So let's move on to the next team. Next team on the list just finished ahead of Vancouver in the North Division, and that's the Ottawa Senators. Originally, I put them as a rebuilder, but I want to say retooler now because I feel like they're young young players are playing pretty well, and they're a couple players away still. Don't get me wrong. They signed Matt Murray to a little bit higher contract that I think he's worth. Um, didn't play very well at all. Um, feel like he's living off his two Stanley Cups that he got very early in his Stack Penguins career. Don't think he's as good as his contract, but I feel so. The notes I have on Ottawa, the good young pieces, and they've hit on their draft picks. Stutzla this year, he looks really good. Brady Tkachuk was a good pick. Drake Batherson played really well this season. I watched a lot more Ottawa than I ever have before with the North Division. So Josh Norris, who I believe they got in the Erik Karlsson trade, he looked like a pretty good young player. Tkachuk, Dzingel, and Batherson are RFAs they have to sign. Derek Stepan and Artem Anisimov are UFAs. I don't know if those two guys will be back. RFAs, I can see being signed to long-term deals. And yeah, I feel like Ottawa is probably a couple of years away still from competing for a playoff spot, but they're getting there. What do you guys think of the Sens?
Yeah, this is another one where you know, from a drama standpoint in terms of this conversation, I'd love to, you know, completely argue with you and start butting heads or something like that. But there's no question. This is if you had asked me before this season where Ottawa is going to be, I would have said, oh man, these guys are a mess and they're going to be a terrible team for years to come. And certainly for the first half of the season, it looked that way. I mean, they were headed for being a historically bad team. But then all of a sudden, some pieces started to click, and you know, of course, they ran into the unbeatable force that was the Calgary Flames for them, you know, or sorry, the completely beatable force of the Calgary Flames.
Yeah.
And but you know what? All that aside, this is a team that really has some very exciting young pieces, and as you said, they've absolutely nailed their draft picks. And now all of a sudden, as the dust settles on this season, they look like they're in a lot better position than it looked like for a number of years. They've been a bit of a victim of circumstance. You know, they made that very questionable trade for Matt Duchene a few years back and ended up having to give that basically a lottery pick to the Colorado Avalanche. That was unfortunate, but then they managed to recover a first round pick when they traded Duchene to the Predators. So, you know, they did make good on that a little bit. Tim Stützle, he really wasn't the big name that came out of that draft, but all of a sudden he's looking like the real deal here. So he's exciting. The fans are very excited about it. To be honest, I think Pierre Dorion is he's done okay, but you know, he's another guy that I wonder if they might not, you know, start to kick some tires. And I don't think he's going anywhere soon, but I do wonder if he's on a little bit of a leash right now, and if the team is starting to get a little bit impatient and want a little bit more change coming up here. But having said that, they do have a lot of money coming off of their cap as well in the next couple of years. And if they keep going with their draft picks the way that they have been, I think this is a team that could be really, really scary in the next couple of years. And not that far off either. I think, you know, they could be challenging for a playoff spot within, I would say, even maybe 2 years.
Yeah, and that I believe that trade they made with Colorado, that pick ended up becoming Cale Makar. So if you look at like when you just look at a first rounder, you don't realize what it could turn into. If you put Cale Makar on that team, they're pretty good. They're a lot better than they are today. So I think it was one of those ones where they could defer the draft pick or something.
Mhm.
So they ended up getting Brady Tkachuk
Yeah.
instead of Cale Makar.
Yeah,
So
they had the choice of the
if you go
two. They
back,
decided to stick with the draft to get Brady Tkachuk, and then that forced them
yeah.
to give up the one the next year for Makar.
Well, if you know you're picking top 4, you don't expect to be doing the same the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of agree with what they did.
Yep.
It didn't work out that way.
Yep.
Like Brady Kachuk's a hell of a player, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But Cale Makar, I think he's one of the top defensemen in the league. Like today, I'm not even talking about young defense. I think he's one of the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's very exciting to watch.
Absolutely.
Watch Colorado in the playoffs. He's so incredible to watch. But Hawk, what's your thinking of the Ottawa Senators here?
Yeah, they definitely shocked me. I thought that they would be a bottom 3 team there, and they came out. They kind of had a rough start, and then they kind of kicked it going. And then they played all the teams hard. I mean, except for Edmonton. I think Edmonton swept them 9 games. Then you wonder why Connor
Yep.
McDavid can't score in the playoffs. Like, you beat on some pretty bad teams there, Connor. So don't be too high on that 100 points, because if you're against Vegas and the Avs, you would have not got those points. But anyways,
Yep.
It's funny to say, right, that you lose a draft pick, a lottery pick, and then you gain one with the San Jose Sharks. And I'm just looking now, they have a first round this year, they have a first and second round, they have the Sharks second rounder. So I mean, they're going to have 3 picks in the top, 36, 37 picks, 30 picks.
Yep.
So, it's good for the rebuild.
Just like last
Tkachuk
year.
was going to be huge. Tkachuk's huge. He's going to be a guy that they're going to lean on, that he's going to carry the team. You could tell he gets frustrated, right? Which is you want your leader to do. He's assistant right now. Goaltending wise, I mean, those goaltenders were going off the cliff like little dodo birds. I mean, they're getting
Yeah.
hurt pre-game, in the game, post-game. I mean, they're getting hurt dressing. So they do have to shore up that goaltending situation. I don't know. Matt Murray's the answer. And even if he's put on to the expansion draft, I don't think the Kraken are going to take him. So I think they're stuck with Murray for a few years.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to defense, right? I mean, they do have a young defense, and we're going to see what they're made of. And it's going to be intriguing, right? You're going back against Boston, against Toronto next year. You're going up against, obviously Detroit and Buffalo, but you also have Montreal. So you're going to still be in a tough division with some big teams. So we'll see what the kids can do, right?
Yeah, agreed. Let's move on to the next team. Arizona Coyotes, next on the list here. I feel like they are a retooler, and I feel like they should have had a better season this year. I didn't follow Arizona Coyote games religiously. I be honest, I don't even think I saw them play
Neither
one
did their
game, so-
fans.
Well, there was a funny tweet how, because Arizona was the first state that allowed fans, and they tweeted out that they're leading the league in attendance, and
Yeah.
like I laughed. I was driving home when I heard it on the radio, and I crashed my car. I laughed so hard. It's usually like all the visiting fans there in an empty arena.
They were allowed back to full capacity in the arena and managed to get 1,000 fans into the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The notes I have for Arizona is they got a good core. I like Clayton Keller and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, still pretty good defenseman. I think he's probably overpaid at this point. I like Darcy Kemper as their goaltender. One interesting note is they do forfeit this first round pick. So if they win the lottery, they basically do a re-lottery. I believe this is some COVID violations that they did in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have exactly what happened in front of me here, but I believe it's something like that. So Alex Goligoski, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, Derek Brassard are notable UFAs. You don't really see them bringing back any of those players. I feel like Goligoski and Hjalmarsson would be good good defensemen that you could add at on July 1st. I don't see them re-signing with Arizona. So what do you guys think of the Coyotes' chances in getting back to the playoffs that they were just a year ago?
I think the Coyotes, this is where we're going to have a little bit of a disagreement, because if you had asked me at the beginning of the season, I would have said that Arizona was probably a retooler, and like you said, I actually expected a lot more of them this year, and for a little while there, around mid-season, they were actually looking really good, but then they kind of fell off a cliff, and I'm actually going to go with full-on rebuild for the Coyotes right now. And I think that part of this is that the team is probably going to give an opportunity to Bill Armstrong, who's now taken over there. I don't know if you remember this, but John Chayka left there very suddenly and under very kind of questionable moral standings. Really kind of shot the team in the foot, to be honest, and in doing so, really, frankly, probably ruined his chances of ever being rehired anywhere in the NHL. But that's that's his choice. But this is a team that definitely has some good pieces. I think forfeiting that first round pick this year is honestly disastrous for them. That's going to be a bigger impact than I think some people realize, especially because now it could have very well been a lottery pick. And all that just to, as you said, they basically just were working players out during the COVID ban. And, how much did they really benefit from that? And I think that was a really poor decision on their part. But, they have some really good up and coming pieces with Clayton Keller, as you said, is a very dynamic player. He's a lot of fun to watch. They've managed to get some decent production out of Phil Kessel, even though that's that was a very puzzling pickup, if I'm being honest there. Nick Schmaltz is not a bad player, maybe a little bit overpaid, but not bad. And Christian Dvorak, I think, is really exciting. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I was not a big fan of that signing, to be honest. He's a very good defenseman, but I thought that was too much money, and I think that he's very good offensively. He's not the greatest defensive defenseman. And I think that's something that they probably need as you look down their defensive lineup. I think they do need a little bit more of that stay-at-home presence. But having said that, we love to joke about Arizona and their lack of fans. We could probably do an entire show just talking about why Gary Bettman is so hung up on sticking with this. But I think we've beaten that to death. But the one thing that is interesting is that Arizona has never been a place that has had trouble attracting free agents. They may not get the bell of the ball, but they do get players to go there, and players talk about how it is a great setting to be a hockey player, and how nice it is to be able to leave the rink in the middle of January, and you leave the rink in shorts and a t-shirt. And from a lifestyle standpoint, it is a great place to play hockey because there's not that mad fan base. A lot of players like that they can be a little bit more anonymous there. So it's a team that has a ton of cap room, and I think that they can really play with that, especially once they lose some of their. Actually, I apologize. I misspoke. Not a ton of cap room, but they will have some, and especially if they let go of those UFAs like Goligoski and Chalmerson, and even Jason Demers. They'll have some cap room to play with this year, but I for one hope that they stay a little bit patient and try and rebuild through the draft. Although, like I said, that loss of that first round pick this year, that's going to hurt.
That's kind of like, I don't mean to jump in front of you, Hawk, again, but that's kind of where I disagreed with the rebuild sentiment, just because they don't have that first. I think maybe they would go one more year. They played pretty well in the bubble. Then they had a bad year. I feel like they maybe take some of that cap space, sign a few guys, maybe re-sign Chalmerson and and Jason Demers, and just try to go at it for one more year, maybe add a few players and see what you can come up with. Just because they don't have that first, it's so hard to be a rebuilding team. And the fans are good when, like, if you get to the playoffs, you get the whiteout going on, like the old Winnipeg stuff that they do in Arizona. They can attract fans if they build a winning team there, and in the playoffs, like you're not going to get that building ever full in regular season, but you get in the playoffs, so they're pretty good fan base. What do you think, Hawk? The Coyotes.
I think they need to change their team name. The Coyote never caught the Roadrunner. It's been a failure since day one. So
I don't know where you come.
And I'll tell you, I mean, and another thing too. I mean, they start climbing that mountain, and then they kind of just tumble down. They can never reach the peak. I mean, it's amazing. I watch a franchise that just idles there, you know, good for a couple of years and then bad for a bunch, good for a couple of years and then go bankrupt and then try to get bought out, then try to get forced to be bought out, then bought out by the NHL, and then have your GM mysteriously leave. It's just, you could almost you could do a movie on this team. Mm-hmm. It's just phenomenal. And yet,
that'd be interesting.
You know, players will go there, which brings, you know, the question is it an atmosphere that's not hockey related that maybe players don't get up for games? You know, it's got to be something. Because, I mean, even when they do get the fans in there, you know, I mean, you talk to a lot of people down in Phoenix, they love it. But, I mean, for the longest time, they were in an area where people didn't want to drive to watch the games. Mm-hmm. So right from the start, and I think Bettman knew it was a failure. And he just said, well, he's too stubborn to admit it. So he's like, we're going to keep him there, whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. So it is a team I like to see in the playoffs. Build that fan base up, you know. And the Canadians that go down there, they'll go down and watch the game. I mean, we always talk about doing a trip down there, going to Arizona and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, but the product on the ice, I mean, they surprised me at the beginning. They were playing well. I mean, you know, they were in the playoff run and then they just fell flat once again. So, but yeah, like you say, losing that first round pick hurts. They got 2 picks in the second round and then they don't have a third round pick. So they got to do something here. New GM with Armstrong there. I mean, it'll be an interesting times in Phoenix. And Phil, the thrill is still there. We love you, Phil. You know, keep on rocking. Maybe you might, you know, and if they falter next year, then you trade the thrill somewhere. You know, maybe trade them back to Toronto. That's what Toronto needs. Toronto needs the thrill. So,
Phil, you know, when he put the hot dogs in the Stanley Cup, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's dipping mustard and eating the hot dogs. Like, what is happening? Yeah. Like, if you look at Phil Kessel.
I love Phil Kessel.
If you look at him on the bench before a game, he looks like a beer league hockey player. He's sitting there. He's all chubby. He's like breathing hard. And then he goes out and he plays his ass off. And it's incredible. So, like, I don't know. Phil Kessel gives us all a chance, in my opinion.
Remember the year he got drafted? He got drafted last in the NHL All-Star game.
Yeah.
Ovechkin's taking pictures of him. He's like, you know, Ovechkin taking pictures of him with his phone.
And yet, kudos to him. He took it in stride and just laughed it off. And he's a guy that, you know, he's heard it all already. So he's like, yeah, well, what can you do?
Nope.
I'm still here making almost $7 million a year, so lap it up all you want.
Yep.
And we will.
No shame.
Great,
no
we
shame,
love him,
Phil.
You know, but he's a player. I think he will get traded next year. If the Coyotes aren't in it, he will get traded to a contender.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. This podcast is going long, but I like it. I like the content. Next team up is very interesting offseason for me, for this team. That's the Blackhawks. I think it's time to rebuild. My notes is it time? ? Good young players, good prospects. So I feel like if you're doing a full rebuild, you got to trade Taves, you got to trade Kane. Do they want to do that? Do they want to just build around them, continue to build around them? I feel like Patrick Kane's still a top 5 player in this league at this present state of time. Jonathan Toews is not what he used to be. He was out with an illness, I think, for the entire season. So don't really know what his status is going to be going forward. So if he's on LTIR, then obviously you can't really trade him or do anything with him. What do you guys think about the Blackhawks? And a Patrick Kane trade would be huge. You'd get a lot for him, and I just don't know. Like they might want to keep Taves and Kane as long-term options and just build around them. So I don't really know. I think they should blow the whole thing up and just start over.
I was actually kind of hoping that this was going to be one of the places where we might disagree, and I thought I was going to be doing something revolutionary by saying that the Blackhawks should rebuild, but here we are agreeing on this. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews are both still incredible players if Jonathan Toews can get over his current health issues. But at the same time, this is a team that is now time has flown by. It's already 6 years since their last Stanley Cup win, and if you can believe it, 11 years since their first Stanley Cup win there in that dynasty. Like time has really flown by, and time has really caught up on some of these players. Like you said, like Patrick Kane, absolutely still one of the most dynamic players in the entire NHL. But at the same time, you could give these guys another opportunity to win immediately, and they would be a team that, like, if you could put them on any team that's kind of on the bubble, like, my God, they instantly become an instant Stanley Cup favorite, if anything. So you could get an absolute king's ransom for them, and you could take these next couple of years, which are probably going to be pretty painful anyways, and rebuild this team almost overnight, while keeping some of these young players. Like Alex DeBrincat is amazing. Like, this guy is as good an offensive player as you'll find anywhere right now, and he's only 23 years old. If you could retool this team in time to hit Alex DeBrincat in his prime, man, like you're on the verge of building another dynasty right here. And Stan Bowman is a smart guy. And I hope that he takes advantage of that and makes some of those deals, which, I think some people will think that they're a little bit of a head scratcher at first, but I absolutely agree. I think that's the way that this team should go. Get some, some ransoms for these guys while you still can, and, set yourself up for a long time to come. If you hold on and you end up losing Patrick Kane for nothing in a couple years, man, that's going to be an unmitigated disaster.
What do you think, Hawk?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you right now, I think one thing that needs to be retired is the Chelsea Dagger and that goal scoring song. I think we've all had enough of that song.
Never.
So,
it's the greatest song ever.
Unless they're playing the Oilers in the playoffs last year and they scored
beating the Oilers last year. No. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
in
they
their
won't
own
play
arena too.
They won't
That was
play
the
that.
best part.
Yeah. They're not going to play the goal horn when they score. 5 seconds in, the Chicago scores, and there it is. But in all seriousness, they could get, like I said, they could get a ton for Patrick Kane. I mean, I'm just looking right now on the salary cap. They have $25 million in long-term injuries with Jonathan Toews, Brent Seabrook, Andrew Shaw, and those guys. 2 of them aren't coming back, I believe.
Seabrook has officially retired, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So he's under,
but I think he was injured.
And Shaw, for sure.
Yeah. But I think because they're still under the long-term injury, I don't know if they get paid or not, but it doesn't matter to the cap.
Mm-hmm.
Trading Patrick Kane would be huge.
I think they still get paid.
Yeah, they still get paid. It doesn't go against the cap, and they can use it for other, right? Now, Jonathan Toews, that'll be an interesting issue. Remember a couple of years ago, Marian Hossa had the same thing. All of a sudden, he couldn't be wearing uniforms or anything, and he had to retire. So hopefully, it's nothing serious because we love Toews, right? but they do have a lot of young players. They got Strome there. They've got Kirby Dockett. You know, they've got that Sutter kid. So Hardman, bunch of restricted free agents. You know, a lot of guys still sign for next year, so it's kind of a tough. You know, I mean, they're going to always play hard, especially if they can get Taves back. But I'm on the fence on this one. I think that they could still compete. They will be in a tough division with the Avs, with the Knights, with the Stars next year. So it's going to be one of those things. Do you go for it, or do you trade Kane, get a whole bunch of money, or sort of get a whole bunch of prospects, rebuild, and come back stronger in a couple of years? I mean, you want to time it that when the Avs are starting to come down, when the Knights are starting to come down, the Stars and those teams are starting to come down, you're rising. And then again, you can take over, right? So it's that timing issue that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah. I think Patrick Kane could get you like a top 6 forward now, multiple first round picks and prospects. I like if we're going to talk about potential Jack Eichel trade, I feel like you could get just as much for a guy like Kane. I know he's older, but he's a proven winner. He's still a top 5 player in the NHL, like I said at the beginning of this. I don't know if they'll be willing to do that with him. But like you said, you could set yourself up for 10 plus years if you hit the trade right with all the young guys they got there in Chicago. So let's move on to the next team, Calgary Flames. I have them as a retooler because we know that this team is they're not going to rebuild. Love it. You're not going to rebuild with Daryl Sutter as head coach. My notes here it says is big changes coming ? Johnny Gaudreau came out this week and says he's open to signing an extension. So that's good news that you hear that he wants to, because ever since he's drafted, everyone's saying he's an Eastern American player. After he signs his first contract, he's going to go to Philly, he's going to go to New Jersey, and it sounds like he likes the city, he likes the team, and he wants to stay for the long term. So I don't think you rebuild if you do something like that. I do think that there could be a potential Jack Eichel trade here. I put it on Facebook. I know, Andy, you didn't agree with what I was saying, but I feel like a Matthew Tkachuk is your number 1 player you could trade and get the most value. I proposed Juuso Välimäki, Matthew Tkachuk, and a first round pick for Jack Eichel. You come in and then got that number 1 center instantly. Monahan is a pretty decent number 2. I don't think he's the number 1 center. And then Elias Lindholm is a really good top 6 forward. You can move him from center to wing depending on how you'd want to do that. They signed Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev in last summer, and both those signings did pretty well. I know we didn't make the playoffs this season, but I feel like this team will be fine going forward if we can do everything that I just mentioned. Andy, what do you think of the Flames? And try not to be too biased with your comments. I know we're hardcore fans here. We want the best for the team, but what do you honestly think about Calgary and where they go from here?
So I honestly, like you said, it is difficult to sometimes separate the fandom from reality, but this is a team that I don't think anybody is going to question underachieved this year. I don't think at the beginning of the season too many people saw the Flames ending up where they were, and as we all know, they very much could have made a push for the playoffs had they just not had those disastrous games against the Senators. And there were some times this year where they should have been able to get up for bigger games, like against Edmonton and some of the games against Toronto where they just didn't show up. So this is a team that I think needs some retooling. I got to be honest, since that post that you made about the Jack Eichel trade, the thought of it has actually grown on me a little bit. And now I actually think I do agree with you a little bit that obviously to bring in a player like Jack Eichel, we'd have to give up a lot. And I agree that Kachuk might be that piece that would work, and it would be painful. I would hate to see Chucky go, but the benefit would be greater than the loss in that case. So I would agree with you on that one. It came out, towards the end of the season that there's no question that Sean Monahan was playing almost the entire season hurt again.
Mhm.
All of a sudden he's become a real health concern, but when he's on and when he's not injured, the guy's almost a guaranteed 25 to 30 goal scorer. So but at the same time, I don't think I'd be too heartbroken if we moved on from him. This is going to be a very interesting offseason because it's going to be it's going to really matter what we end up losing in the draft, in the expansion draft. We're not going to lose a key piece of our young core, which is good. We already know that everybody is pretty well protected there, and True Living has done a really good job of protecting that. But the way I see it, we're going to lose either Lucic, Giordano, who I think is unlikely just given his age, although that would be a heck of a good player for Seattle to bring in as a mentor, and he would probably almost immediately be named their captain. But I do think that I think the player that they're going to end up targeting is Shillington, and we can argue that in a lot of ways, but I think Shillington has been a little bit misused here, and I think if Seattle picks him up, he'll have a lot of potential to really show what he can do, and that one might end up backfiring a little bit. We're already seeing signs that the trade of Sam Bennett, that was unfortunate given that he was the highest draft pick this team has ever had, and but we'll see what we get as a return with those draft picks that we got from Florida. But I think a lot of people kind of saw that that Sam needed a change of scenery. There's no question. But I think a lot of fans cringed a little bit and said, this one could really end up backfiring on us. And sure enough, we're seeing some signs of that. But anyway, sorry, I'm going a little bit long here. But this is a team that still has a really good young core. Elias Lindholm is one of the top two-way players, I think, in the entire league. I could see him being, potentially a Selke candidate in the next couple years. With Andrew Mangiapane and Dylan Dubé, who, it's really unfortunate that he's going to be unable to play at the World Championships. That was a really good opportunity for him. But I think this is a team that is going to retool this year, has some potential to make a return next year. Keep in mind, we're only 2 years removed from having won the conference in the regular season. Now, while that was a little bit of an overachievement, it's not out of the realm of possibility to get back to that. But I think this is a team that has to have a short leash. We have 2 more years of Daryl Sutter. And I think if there's no signs of some real drastic improvement and real drastic change in culture, I think the team needs to pull the trigger and go back into rebuild mode, sooner than later.
Great, Hawk. What do you
I can
think?
see the grin on Jeff's face, and I'm worried here, man. I'm worried about what's coming here.
Well,
That's okay.
I'd say the first thing the Calgary Flames need to do, they need to build a damn stadium. Like, you need to move into the 21st century, not the 1800s. We don't need a big concrete stone building to play hockey in anymore. Love the beer, though. Don't get me wrong. Love the beer.
Yeah.
No, in all fairness,
Yeah,
I will say this. They are another team that's funny. I mean, they have great games, great outings, and then they come up against Ottawa on this lie flat, right? So I don't know how to do something maybe with the Kachuk brothers, just not maybe the energy for Matthew wasn't there. I don't know. But I mean, coming into next year, you guys are gonna have a great starting goaltender in Markstrom. You guys are still gonna have Tanev, who everybody's been texting me saying, hey, you know what? We didn't know much about him. Love the guy, right? He's gonna wear his heart on his sleeve. The expansion draft, I don't know if they're going to take a chance on Lucic, maybe. but I mean, he started playing well near the end, saying that he would accept the fact that he would get drafted, if be eligible for the draft. I think you still have to run with the core though. If Johnny wants to sign, that'd be great for the organization. But I think down the road, you're gonna have to make a decision. Do you keep Johnny? Do you keep Monahan? If things aren't going well, you're gonna have to make that decision. But you're gonna be in a division next year that's gonna have, you're gonna have the Knights, you're gonna have the Oilers, but they do have a chance to be that third team, right? Because you're gonna go up against Vancouver, you're gonna go up against LA, San Jose, Anaheim. So I mean, the chances of us having a Battle of Alberta next year could be very high. And Oilers second and the Flames third. I think it's just pieces here that they have to deal with. Maybe a couple of signings, couple key grinding players, a little bit more grit. I don't think there's a lot of grit out there, the games I watched. But I mean, hey, they're not far off from making a run either. I think Sutter was going to rein them in, and they're gonna have to end up playing hockey. There's gonna be no floating, none of this. And I think Kachuk's gonna have to have a big year next year for anything to happen. If he has a big year, the Flames will make the playoffs. I'll put it that way.
And just to come back to that, like, I mean, I know it's easy as a Flames fan to say this, but I think I really think that Daryl Sutter was the person that needed to come in, and that was what Treliving said during the press conference when he came in. He said this team needed Daryl Sutter, and I agreed 100%. This was a team that was underachieving. This team, honestly, this year was very frustrating to watch. There just was not nearly enough drive and not nearly enough killer instinct. And one of the things that I'll point to on that point is look at how many empty net goals the Flames had this year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but right off the top of my head, I think it was maybe 4. Okay. And simply put, when they had an opportunity to put a team away, they just wouldn't. They would start floating, and there just wasn't that killer instinct that you need when you're a top tier team. And so I hope that Sutter can get more out of them with a full season. And I still have a lot of respect for Brad Treliving. I know that a lot of fans were kind of calling for his head, but I don't think he's the problem here. I think he's done a lot of really great things for this team, and I think he's going to continue to do that. And honestly, I don't think the ownership has any appetite to move in a different direction there. So I think we will have Brad Treliving still for another couple of years.
Yeah, I think Brad and Sutter are going to be tied together. I think it's going to be kind of like a two-year window until basically the core will need to either be re-signed or traded. Monahan has 2 years left. Johnny and Kachuk have 1. Kachuk is an RFA, so he's kind of controlled that way. His qualifying offer is going to be high, kind of like the Patrick Laine. So that's why I think Kachuk would have the best value, because Buffalo, a lot of people are saying, oh, just trade Johnny to Buffalo for Eichel. I'm like, well, sure, but Johnny's not going to re-sign in Buffalo. Sure. Like, if he's 1 year left, like, you're not doing that. Monahan maybe in that trade, because he does have a little bit more term, but maybe as a throw-in extra piece to fill that roster spot on the Sabres. Excuse me. And so we won't talk about this too much longer, but we all know what we want to happen, and hopefully it does. Let's move on to the next team. We only got 3 teams to go here, so bear with us. We got the Philadelphia Flyers, and I feel like it's time to blow this team up. They're kind of in a San Jose situation with their forwards. They get like a lot of high-priced older players. Claude Giroux, which I think is coming up on a contract. I think he has 1 year left. He's high. I'm spacing on a couple of the other high-priced names on the Flyers, but I feel like they should rebuild, build around some of their younger players. Nolan Patrick has actually, I don't know if he's requested a trade, but it's kind of been known that he wants a change of scenery. So see if they do something with him. He's a restricted free agent. Carter Hart's a restricted free agent. So see what happens. See what's happens with those guys. So what do you guys think of the Flyers? And is it time for them to go in another direction?
So I'm excited about this one, DK, because finally we have what I would consider a very firm disagreement here to start discussing, because I think the Philadelphia Flyers are in retooling mode. And I think that their offseason can be and should be about one word and one word only, and that is goaltending. Oh my God, can the Flyers please get themselves a goaltender who can get over a 900 save percentage? They had some potential coming up. You know, it looked for a while there like Carter Hart was kind of the next thing. And then this year was just an absolute disaster for him. They had three goalies who, you know, they kind of split evenly in thirds with Brian Elliott, Carter Hart, and Alex Lyon, and not a single one of them had over a 900 save percentage. So here's where I think they go with that, because this is a team that to me has an amazing core. Claude Giroux, he's kind of he's had some issues finding some consistency, but he's still a guy that on a full 82 game season, he can easily put up 90 points if he gets into the right situation. They have Jakub Voracek, who's still a really great offensive talent, maybe a little bit overpaid, but he's a guy that also could put up 90 points. They have Sean Couturier, who to me is the most complete two-way player in the entire game. And that it's no coincidence that he's a perennial nominee for the Selke. The Kevin Hayes signing was definitely questionable, and I think they grossly overpaid him. But this is a team that if they can get some solid goaltending and some really good production out of their defense, they might need to move on from Shane Gostisbehere because he puts up some really good points, but he's a big defensive liability. If they could trade him and get one more kind of good stay-at-home defenseman, and for the love of God, get themselves a goaltender, which they've been searching for since Ron Hextall left them. It's got to really chap the Philadelphia Flyers fans' butts to know that they let go of Sergei Bobrovsky for a second and a third round pick. Because like I said, like they have struggled for a goaltender for so long. But here's where earlier in the podcast I discussed about this and said, what could the Kings potentially do with Jonathan Quick? There's your out right there, Los Angeles Kings. Get Jonathan Quick traded to Philadelphia. This is a team that could make a really good, solid run for it next year. After that, you know, they're probably no more than, I would say, 2 years away from having to do to blow it up and start over again. But to me, the Philadelphia Flyers, this is their window. They need to get that goaltender and make a run for it and not waste all of this talent that they have in their team.
So I'm just curious, are you saying give up on Carter Hart?
Yes.
And go with Jonathan Quick, or are you saying keep Hart and then just trade for Quick and have Quick and Hart be like your 1-2?
Potentially, okay. Maybe I was a little bit too quick to say yes on that about Carter Hart. Maybe it's too young. I mean, this is a guy that's 22 years old. We know that goaltenders are kind of a different animal, and they can take a while to develop. So no, I definitely jumped the gun on there. I would not totally give up on Carter Hart, but I don't think he's ready to be your number one just yet. Bringing in a guy like Jonathan Quick, who has won 2 Stanley Cups and has played very well, like he is a playoff goaltender. I think he would be a very good, mentor for Carter Hart. Brian Elliott, I mean, he's been kind of just, just kind of a throw-in for them for a little while anyways. But they definitely need someone that's a little bit more proven than a Brian Elliott. And I think Jonathan Quick could definitely be that player.
Well, let's I just pulled up Carter Hart's stats here. So the past season was atrocious. We can agree with that. 9 wins, 11 losses, 5 OT losses, 367 goals against, and an 877 save percentage. But if you look at his career statistics, but if you this is where I'm asking you to check out the whole picture here. If you look at his career,
Mhm.
he's 101 games. He's 95 starts. He's 49 in 37, so he's over 500. He has a 288 goals against and a save percentage of 905. And if he could get those stats on a consistent basis, which I think he could, if like if they let him develop a little bit more. So I wouldn't give up on Carter Hart, and Jonathan Quick I feel is kind of past his prime. So we definitely disagree on what you said there, but it's fun to finally have a debate and not just agree with each other on everything. Hawk, what do you think about the Philadelphia Flyers, and do you agree with Andy's insight on the goaltending thing that we were talking about there?
Well, when you think of Philadelphia Flyers, you think of Gritty. I mean, they have to re-sign that guy first and foremost, right? I mean, he's all over the place, but
The best mascot in the league, no doubt about it.
MVP right
oh
there.
yeah,
They should just put him out there.
it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Hey, man, I think you do what. You know what? They should have him in it with the other mascots playing football. I guarantee. You know when you see the other mascots run over kids,
Yeah,
man, he'd run the whole line over.
he
But
hit that kid.
on all
You remember
serious note,
that?
though, oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah,
There was like some
and then they had that-
lawsuit.
yes.
Gritty hit
And then
me.
they found out that they're lying.
So great.
They're lying, and he had that post that said "F them kids."
Yep.
It was great, but
I love it.
oh man.
Oh
But,
man, that's good stuff.
In all seriousness, I do like, put it this way, I do like Quick. If Quick were to go to Philly, I think that'd be huge for Hart. I mean, he had a phenomenal rookie season. I know this year again. Let's put it this year's been a normal year, right? It's been a anomaly. So, I wouldn't jump the gun too much on him, but at the same time, it's tough to play in Philadelphia, especially if you're a goaltender. I mean, the fans are going to get on you real quick. I mean, they booed Santa Claus, Philly fans. I mean, they cheer when Irving broke his leg. I mean, they threw batteries. I mean, they have
They're
a
Eagle
jail
fans,
in their
you gotta remember
football
that.
stadium for crying out loud, you know? So,
Yeah.
But I do think if they do get a good goaltender who's got experience and they can help him out, I think that would help his career out a lot. I think having Giroux and them do their thing this year.
We got a
said you
special
have
guest.
the defense. Yes, the cat. You know, you have that Shane Gosserbier, or sorry, can't pronounce his name right now. I mean, he was lighting the league up there the first year, wasn't he? So
Offensively, yes.
I do.
Defensively,
Yes, and I mean
that guy's a liability.
no. Yeah, and I mean they played well the last few years. I think for you guys, I think they will just retool a bit and they'll make a run for the playoffs next year. I mean, they are a funny team. I think 2 years ago, didn't they win like 17 or 18 games out of 20 something to make the playoffs? Or, you know, and then were they fourth last year before they went to the bubble or something? So, I mean, they're right there. I mean, you're not going to rebuild.
I could see
think
Philly
you are going to
coming
retool
right back
and
too.
away you go.
So, yeah.
Yep.
It's hard
they're like the Boston
see what-
Bruins. You can't keep the Boston Bruins down for too long. Same with the Philadelphia Flyers. And those teams seem to come back from the dead. You're like, what? Where did you come from? They just sit there and smile. It's like, Jesus, go away for a while, right? Let other teams have some fun in the playoffs. But no, honestly, I think it's just they're going to retool and they'll be back. So don't worry, Philly fans. Gritty will be back as well. Entertain you guys.
The next second and last team here, Dallas Stars. I feel like they're ready to win the Stanley Cup. They were in the finals last year. I feel like the Flames should have beat them. Could have gone up 3-1 and just let that goal in at the end and kind of screwed everything up. But yeah, I feel like Dallas is ready to win now. They had a lot of injuries this year. So my notes are: is it a one-season setback? They are ready to win, and injuries were a big deal for them. They don't have a lot of free agents to sign. Pagliano and Vatanen are probably the top two UFAs, and Miro Heiskanen, who I feel is a very good young defenseman. He's their top RFA. Um, I think Dallas um, will be like that. Central Division is really good. You got Colorado and you got Minnesota playing a lot better, and Nashville's there too, and St. Louis. Some pretty decent teams. Um, I feel like Dallas is kind of in the middle. Like Colorado is kind of the top team, and maybe Dallas can be two or three, and Minnesota in there too. So, what do you guys think of the Stars? And do you think that they'll be back in the postseason next year?
Yeah, I definitely think that this was a one-off for them. I mean, for them to go from the Stanley Cup Finals to missing the playoffs with really not a lot of changes on their team, it was obviously a big step back. They had some bad circumstances with Tyler Seguin basically missing the entire season. That's a big problem. But Tyler Seguin, I'm a big fan of. Jamie Benn is probably my favorite player in the league almost. Now he's, his production fell off a little bit this year, but I think that there's nothing but upside for him to do a bounce back. Their off season, I mean, they're going to get a decent draft pick here. Maybe not anything huge, but hopefully they can make good on that. Jim Nill is a great guy as a general manager. I think that he's a guy that really we talked earlier in the podcast about the patience of Detroit, and I think Jim Nill, he came up in the Detroit organization, and he's learned all about patience, and that's why he himself was so patient about first taking a general manager role. And I think he's going to be patient with this team, but I also do think, Rick Bowness obviously did some really good things with them last year, getting them to the Stanley Cup final. But I also think that was catching lightning in a bottle a little bit. And Rick Bowness is a great man. Like, he's a great hockey man, but I think he's more tooled to be an assistant coach. And I think that's why he was an assistant coach for so many years since his last opportunity as a head coach. And I honestly think, I'm going to throw this out there, total wild prediction here, but to me, Dallas is a team that could benefit from somebody like John Tortorella. And if they brought John Tortorella in on a short-term contract, because again, we've talked about this already, you don't want to bring John Tortorella in long-term. But if Dallas could bring in a player like that and just give those superstars, especially a player like Tyler Seguin, just a little bit of a kick in the butt, man, this team could be scary.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like I could see that benefiting Dallas for sure. I'm not sure like what Tortorella wants to do, if he wants to take some time off, or if he wants to retire, or if he wants to maybe he definitely wants to find a team that is ready to win. I don't think he wants to rebuild or anything like that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he would go to a team like Dallas. What's your thoughts on the Stars, Hawk?
Well, yeah, they were a team that got hit with COVID right off the hop. So that was a setback, and then they just couldn't get it rolling. I think they had some great moments there. They're missing some key players. This is a team I don't even think they have to do. They don't even have to retool. They don't have to rebuild. It was a one-off. They'll be back in the playoffs next year. And to be honest, I mean, there's not much I don't think we can discuss about this team. They're right. I mean, they might add a piece here or there. I mean, they're maxed out on the salary cap as it is. So, I mean, you're going to have to roll with them, right? They have great goaltending, right? Their defense is ranked up there. They got the forwards that can match, that can play playoffs, that got the experience. So, I mean, they're a team that I think they're going to be fine. They're one of those teams that just had a bad year. And with the 56th season, they just didn't get off the gates quick enough, and they were doomed from the start. So I'd have no worries on the Stars. They're going to make playoffs next year. So, and they might even challenge for a cup next year. I think
we're all on the same boat with Dallas. So go to the last team on the list here who finished with the least chance to get the number one pick. It's the New York Rangers. I feel like they're ready to win. They have a lot of prospects, and they've got some good young players. And I feel like they have the most to offer in the Jack Eichel trade. I feel like they could offer two real young, maybe like Philip Cheidel and Capo Cacro and some draft picks, and they could bring Jack Eichel in, and he could be their number one center. You can make him the captain if you wanted. I think Eichel would benefit from playing in a market like that where he's wanted. I agree with what Andy said at the beginning of the podcast, where Buffalo was pumping Connor McDavid's ego until they lost the lottery, and then Eichel felt like second place. It started off bad, and it never really worked. So my thinking, the Rangers are close to being a really good team. If they could make that trade work, that would be beneficial for both teams between Buffalo and New York. And I think the Rangers are ready to become like a perennial playoff team every year and start competing for Stanley Cups.
So I'm gonna almost agree with you, but I'm gonna actually stick with the retooling. This is a team that's been in a rebuild for a little while, and I think that there's no question that they have some unbelievable pieces. They like Artemi Panarin has really turned into a perennial Hart contender, and they've got Mika, Mr. 6-point Zibanejad. I don't know if you guys caught this earlier this year, but he became only the second player in NHL history to have 2 games in which he had 3 goals and 3 assists. The only other person to do that was Wayne Gretzky, who did it approximately 9 years apart. Mika Zibanejad did them both in the same season.
Against the same team.
Is unbelievable.
Incredible.
Like it's unbelievable.
Against the Flyers.
Yeah, it was against the same team too
That's
because
right.
of the COVID schedule. So shout out to that Philly goaltending.
There's no question. I mean, the Rangers are, they've also been the benefit of a couple of really high draft picks in recent years, where they got Capo Caco and, of course, getting the first overall pick with Alexis Lafreniere. He again didn't quite set the world on fire as much as we maybe expected from what we've seen from some of the recent first overall picks. But I think he has a lot of upside, and I think he's a guy that in the next couple of years is going to be as good as he's been touted to be. They have great young goaltending. Obviously the Rangers kind of went into a little bit of a shock mode when suddenly they started a season without King Henrik, and that was a long time that they had him, and he was really the face of the team. But it was absolutely the right move to make, and if they can just get some stability out of those 2 guys between Georgiev and Shesterkin, they're going to be good. But I think the biggest thing that the Rangers are actually going to benefit from is addition by subtraction, getting Anthony DeAngelo, kick him to the curb. Don't let that guy come back into the dressing room. He's a cancer in the locker room. And I think just letting him go is really the biggest thing that they've done for their team. So I think I absolutely agree with you that they are headed in the right direction, and they are going to be a scary team. But I think it's important that they be patient and give it another maybe 1 or 2 years, and then really start to go for the throat.
Right, Hawk, what do you think? The Rangers.
Patience in New York just doesn't seem to go together, does it? After a while, the fans start getting upset. Everybody starts getting upset, and the next thing you know, right, we all know the New York market. We see it on TV, right, guys? And either you make it in New York or you don't, right? Stars get there to light up or get burnt out real quick. I mean, it's a crazy town to be playing hockey in. I mean, they love their hockey down there, that's for sure. But I think they're on the verge of something special. I mean, this year they had $12 million in buyout money spent. Next year, that's down to $4 million roughly. So there's $8 million right there that they can use. That's should be able to get a piece. I mean, they have young goaltending. I don't know, maybe they go after a goaltender who might get them into the playoffs. They're kind of on that bubble too, where it's either make or break now, right? It's like, I mean, you have your stars signed for long term, right? You have I think you have some defensemen here signed for for quite a few years. So, or at least one. You have Trouba anyways for 6 years. So, I mean, I think defense goaltending is one that's kind of might hold them back a bit. They are young, but they do have the money to play with now. And I mean, they're in a tough division, right? You're going up against the Capitals and the Islanders and the the Flyers and the Pens and the Islanders. So, but I mean, eventually, as the New York Rangers, you got to make some moves here, right? And I think that they're on the cusp of making it. They're kind of like, I'd say they're a couple slots down below Dallas, but they're another team that's right there, ready to break through. And when they do, they're going to break through in a big way. And it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, that whole division is going to be fun to watch next year. I guarantee you that much.
My last point on the Rangers is just like you mentioned about patience, and I agree that that's not something that they've typically shown. And back when the Rangers were a perennial playoff threat, the one thing that you could count on them for almost every single year without fail is that they would make a big free agent signing, and they would quite often get like the big name. You look back to when they signed Daniel Briere and Chris Drury. They got, you remember. But here's where I caution that is that they've also made some real disasters in terms of those pickups. They picked up Marion Gaborik.
Agreed.
They picked up Wade Redden. I mean, nobody can forget the absolute disaster of that Wade Redden signing. Even to a lesser extent with why am I drawing a blank on his name? Brad. You know who I'm talking about. Brad Richards.
Brad Richards.
Sorry, I was totally drawing a blank on his last name.
Yeah.
But they need to make sure that they don't make another move like that, because this is a team that is so on the cusp and they have a ton of money to work with. But they need to make sure that if they make a big free agent signing, that it's the right free agent signing that isn't going to end up handcuffing them for several years with these, these cap recapture penalties and stuff like that. So if they make a move, it's got to be the right one. But I think the Rangers should hold tight another year or two, give those goaltenders a little bit more of a chance, and they'll be ready to go, and they could be a really exciting team.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I was just looking at the free agency list here. Now, the number one guy on the list is not leaving the team that he's on. It's Alex Ovechkin. It's the number one on the UFA list. I don't see Washington letting him go for any reason.
No.
You got it's sorted by the 2020-2021 cap hit, so it's not necessarily the number one free agents out there. But then you got Ryan Getzlaf, Taylor Hall, David Krejci. Tuukka Rask is the number one goalie on the list. So by Hawk's point, maybe if Boston decided to go in another route, then Tuukka Rask could come in and maybe be that goaltender. I see New York rolling with the two guys that they got now, Shesterkin and Georgiev.
Those are two good young goalies.
I like both of them. I don't know if New York has to leave one of them unprotected in the draft. I don't know if they have enough service time yet. So we can talk about that when we do our Seattle Kraken mock in coming weeks. So that being
Speaking
said,
of which, we haven't done the off-season review of the Seattle Kraken today. They're good.
Well,
they're done.
I left
think
them
we're
off
pretty
the list
clear on what
they
their
don't
off-season plan is.
Yeah.
We're going to have me and DAHAWK are going to alternate picks and do a mock of the Seattle Kraken, and we're going to see what kind of team we can come up with. It should be fun on a later episode, because if we did a Seattle Kraken mock, this pod would probably go 4 hours. So we're going to
we've talked about
end this now. We want to thank Andy for joining us today, and really appreciate lots of good content. And if you like the show, please drop a comment, give us a like, follow us on YouTube and Facebook. And thank you, Andy. And do you have anything left to say?
No, it's been a pleasure,
Before we
guys.
sign off here?
It's very humbling to follow in the footsteps of Peter Lubardius, but I hope I could bring a little bit of an interesting discussion there, and I'd love to do it again.
Sounds
Yeah,
great.
no, for sure. Thank you for coming on, and it was fun. You have lots of knowledge anyways. I mean, blew me out of the water. I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, having Peter Lobardius on the show, that was pretty cool. He's a super nice guy. I talked to him off camera for almost an hour before we started recording, and I actually had to tell him that he had to stop talking because he was giving all this cool stories off air. We got to record this stuff. So
yeah. One of the finest
cool
gentlemen
guy
in the world of hockey. So I've got nothing but respect for Lou.
I agree. He's already said that he'd come back on. And
perfect.
So
and I'll be on that time
really
too.
Cool.
So.
Yep. Right. Yep. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.